This is Jerome Corsi, and thank you for joining us here at thetruthcentral.com. Today is Monday. It's August 7th, 2023. Our first story involves the downgrading of the United States, which occurred last week. It didn't really get a lot of attention, of course, because the mainstream media does not really want this well known. But Fitch, which is one of the big rating agencies, downgraded the United States from AA to AA from AAA ratings. And that's a big deal because it means that we're less credit worthy. Now, why did that occur? For several reasons, which again, the mainstream media is not going to report. They're going to say it's because of January 6th or something like that. Another lie. Fitch's reasons were the erosion of government and a steady deterioration in the standards of government over the last 20 years, including on fiscal and debt matters. And that's been the truth. We just enormously expanded the federal debt from the time when George W. Bush was in office. It's now $33 trillion about. Secondly, rising general government deficits. Their deficits are just too large. General government debt is going to rise. In other words, we've got too much debt, and the economy is going to slip into recession. And with tighter credit conditions, weakening business investment, and a slowdown in consumption is going to push the United States into a recession in fourth quarter 2023 and first quarter 2024. According to the Fitch projections. That's very much in line with what I'm projecting. And by the way, on the website, you can see this book we have, which is how the coming global crash will create an historic gold rush. And if you call that 800 number at our sponsor, Swiss America, you can get a free copy of the book. Okay, now the second story. Again, I'm going to cover a couple of economic stories first, and then we're going to do a couple on Donald Trump. But the economics, I think, are extremely important right now, and I think we've got to. I'm going to stress paying attention to them because we're going to go into a recession. It's going to already started, but it's going to get severe. I think coming in September, October, November, December. I don't think we're going to have to wait until the fourth quarter. I think it'll start being noticed in September next month. All right, well, the second one is that there's 7 trends. This was an interesting article. There are 7 trends which show that economic disaster is rapidly approaching. And this is by Michael Snyder, and I followed Michael quite a bit. I think he's a good writer, and he's got good insights. So he's saying that whenever the economy slows down, tax revenue it slows down too. And right now, the federal and state government tax revenues are declining precipitously. That's true, and causing a problem already for the federal government, having to print more debt. When the economy slows, trucking companies see less demand for their services. This Yellow, which is one of the major trucking companies, is declaring bankruptcy. And again, this is a big sign that the economy is slowing down. Number 3, employment is supposed to be the bright spot for the economy, but the latest employment reports show that the United States actually lost about 585,000 full-time jobs last month. The jobs being created are part-time jobs, and they're not being honestly reported again. We're not getting honest data from the federal government. That more job cuts have been announced with rising interest rates, almost 20% higher than a year ago. It's going to be much more difficult to get mortgages. It's going to cost quite a bit more with 7% interest compared to 3% interest to finance a house. And the share of the United States that cannot even afford a $400 emergency expense continues to go up. People are living on credit cards, and people are living check to check, paycheck to paycheck. So this is a difficult economic time, and I'm going to predict and have been predicting that gold is going to rise dramatically. I think there's going to be a very severe economic downturn. And I think the policies of the federal government are designed to cause a downturn. It's the only way the Fed can handle the inflation that we are now creating by so much money printing. We're in a complete bind. The Biden administration has no fiscal control. Tax revenues are declining. They have very high Social Security. They're going to have high unemployment, Medicare, Medicaid. All these are expenses that are just going to continue to burgeon. So I'm expecting we'll have a severe economic downturn. Chris, do you want to comment on this?
It's coming. It's looked pretty bad for a long time, but when President Biden went into office, he was clamoring about climate change, and we saw what happened to the Western European nations when they started pushing their climate change agenda, setting money aside to uh, push these anti-oil or anti-fossil fuel, if you will, policies. As soon as Biden did that, started limiting production, limiting refining, limiting drilling, all of a sudden energy and food prices went up. After that, everything else goes up. And following from there, we have economic issues. Don't forget, we printed money for a couple of years already, thanks to the COVID panic. We're also printing money because he wants to forgive student loans. We're sending money to Ukraine. This was a formula for disaster as soon as January 2021 started. So it wasn't January 6, 2021 that was the issue. It's January 21st, or I believe it was 20th, whichever one, 2021.
It was the inauguration is January 20th.
Right. That was the issue. That was the day in January where everything started turning around for the worse.
Well, I think that's exactly right. Now, let's go to a couple stories on Trump. This first one is, I think, very interesting, that Trump's attorneys are saying that Pence's testimony can prove Trump's innocence. Now, first of all, I think Pence has completely shot himself in the foot running for president. He doesn't have a chance. And largely because on the January 6th, 2021, when the Congress was ratifying the presidential election in November 2020, Pence did not object. And Trump was urging him to go forward and say there was fraud and try to. It's a very technical issue in the Constitution, whether or not Pence had the authority to send the votes back to the states that had certified what was apparently a fraudulent election. Now, when Pence testifies, see, Trump did not get charged with treason. He got charged with these offenses of basically First Amendment offenses of speaking out against and objecting to a fraudulent election. And the charges are that he knew it wasn't fraudulent, and yet he said these things, which is a First Amendment case. And professors like Alan Dershowitz at Harvard or Jonathan Turley have made it very, very clear that these are outrageous indictments which have very little merit and are challenging the core of the First Amendment, which is the ability to speak out and object to anything. And, you can't just say anything at all. There are limits, but the limits are very, very narrowly defined. You have to be at the point of inciting a crime that could really happen because you said something or tried to incite it. And that link between the violent act or the criminal act and the speech has to be very, very close and serious. Well, in this case, what Pence is going to testify to is that Trump was taking the advice of his attorneys, who at the time believed the election was fraudulent and wanted it objected to. Now, Trump had a right to do that because, again, he was following the advice of his attorneys. Pence disagreed. Pence decided he did not have the authority to go in and send the election back to the states. That's what his attorneys were telling him. And ultimately, he didn't do that. Well, that's probably the end of Pence's political career. But Trump getting Pence's testimony is going to be able to explore what happened inside the White House. Now, this next story, I think, is also very important and little appreciated. And it is the Democrats and this Jack Smith, the Trump hatred is almost outrageous. And they've twice tried to impeach Trump. At one time, just for a phone call that he made with the Ukrainian president, where he dared to mention Biden's massive corruption, which we now know is true. We've got all kinds of whistleblowers. And again, the Department of Justice, with a double standard of justice, is doing nothing for Biden, while they're going after Trump. Well, there was an interview done with one of the consultants. It was an interview that was done in Great Britain, and I thought it was quite good. This was an interview with this. What was her name? Her name was Jan Halper Hayes, who is an analyst, and she was being interviewed in Great Britain. And what she said, I think, is extremely important. We're going to play the first couple minutes of it, and then let you decide for yourself. Chris, are you ready to put it up on the screen? Go ahead.
Good to see you, as always.
Good to see you.
There's so many people putting this down as a political conspiracy theory, but actually there are real questions to be answered here.
There are?
Yeah, of course there are. Of course there are.
What he's being accused of, but what part do you think is to answer that the 2020 election is going to be litigated because of this? They've made a huge, huge mistake with this one, because even though we thought what was going to happen was they were going to go after him for treason or sedition, but they did criminally charge him, but they didn't go to that extreme. As a result, he has due process, so he can subpoena people and bring things in. Now, let me say something about this 2020 election, is that Biden is the legitimate president, but he's the legitimate president of what is now the bankrupt U.S. corporation. And that was a treaty in 1871. Well, on September 12th, 2018, Trump created an executive order. Within that, he outlined in future elections any kind of foreign or domestic interference, specifically for the 2020 election. So we say, how did he know some of these things were going to happen? Election integrity on both sides of the aisle is tough. It's really tough. But what this has done is it's opened the door for Trump to present his case.
Well, that's a good thing, isn't it? Because what we see on this side of the pond is a very difficult situation where the legal system is politicized in the United States, which is abhorrent to us over here. So the fact that Trump can subpoena, some people saying it's a mistake by Jack Smith, but actually he can subpoena, people can actually see evidence from both sides. That's a sensible move. Exactly.
And it's a great mistake by Jack Smith that he's done that. Absolutely great. See, the thing is, think about Edward Snowden and all the information he had. Think about the fact that our military, our Department of Defense Space Force, if you think that they don't have the actual real results from the election, then you're fooling yourself.
Yeah, but what we
Okay, let's stop right there. That she's making the point that this indictment is going to give Trump a chance to now put on the table that the 2020 election was fraudulent. And he can introduce evidence. He can bring in testimony. He may have known, which he says in the remainder of the interview, which is perhaps a little bit speculative, but she's saying that Trump decided in 2020 that it would cause a revolution if he really pressed too hard the question of the fraudulent nature of the 2020 election. But he knew it was, and he knew that the data existed in these intelligence agencies that he could ultimately bring forward to show the election was fraudulent. Now, if you get the NSA saying it's fraudulent and Trump gets that in testimony, it's going to be very strong. And it's going to wake up the American people, because Trump is probably going to get cameras in the courtroom. Now, this judge is completely biased against Trump. She has made a series of outrageous decisions that I know the Washington courts. I tried to, when Mueller was after me to put me in prison because they accused me of lying on Russian collusion, that I was withholding information about Julian Assange. I wasn't. They did not indict me, even though they gave me a plea deal. They didn't indict me. So they're lying, and they know they're lying. Department of Justice. And when this comes out, the American people are going to see both the corruption of the election, they're going to see the corruption of the judge, they're going to see the corruption of the Department of Justice, and Trump's going to put them all on trial. Now, she may try to suppress his rights, and Trump will likely get convicted because this jury is going to be biased. 95% of the people in Washington, D.C. voted for Biden. But it's going to be overturned because, again, the violation of rights under the First Amendment are egregious. This case should never have been indicted. They knew they couldn't say it was sedition or treason, which is what they tried to say January 6th is. Couldn't do that. So they basically accused Trump of lying. Well, again, there's free speech is a very, very robust concept. It means you've got to hear speech you don't like to hear. It means somebody can lie. And again, unless it's producing some horrible result that they did lie, and it's hard to determine that they lied. I mean, the person may believe what they say, even if it is not true. They believe it, well, they weren't lying. How do you know what Trump really believed? You have to look into his heart. Well, again, these are very, very difficult legal questions, and I don't think there's a chance this case will do anything except boost Trump's popularity and give him a stage during the election or right up to the election in 2024 to lay this case before the American people. Now, I want to move on and a couple points here on the global warming, because I think Chris was right. This whole global warming agenda is fundamentally a depopulation agenda. The demonization of carbon dioxide is being done because we produce hydrocarbon fuels produce carbon dioxide. If burning hydrocarbon fuels produce carbon monoxide, which is a poison, this global warming crowd may have a point, but it doesn't. And in fact, this whole minor molecule of carbon dioxide cannot possibly have the global warming effects that are being assumed. Now, I wrote an article here in American Thinker that this global warming is morphing into global boiling. Well, this is a hoax, but the climate hysterics are turning up the heat. They want you to think that the earth is burning up, and they are pointing to everything, it's the hottest July and ever. That's what they want you to think. Well, it's not the case. Historically, it's nonsense. The 1930s were much warmer. And I quote a lot of the meteorologists who say that that was the case. And this is completely a misapplication of data. Furthermore, the sun right now is burning hotter in its current sun cycle 25 than it did in sun cycle 24. That again heats up the earth. So all of the natural effects, we also have El Nino, which is the water currents in the Pacific Ocean, which again will induce, when El Nino comes in, it gets warmer in North America. We're also, our orbit right now is about the most circular it's been. We get to an elliptical orbit, more egg-shaped, about every 100,000 years. We will have another ice age, and it won't have anything to do with carbon dioxide. So what this whole global warming nonsense is about, I'm sure they want another global climate lockdown. These people are depopulationists, and we know that since we are going to start writing about that this week. This was a 1974 National Security Administration, this was a National Security memo. It was called the Kissinger Report. It was issued in December 10th, 1974. It's NSSM 200, National Security Study Memorandum 200. And it essentially says that we are needing to depopulate, implications of worldwide population growth for U.S. security and overseas interests. And it's a thick report. I mean, this has got, it's well over 100 pages, thick report. And Kissinger was saying basically, we need to depopulate. Well, when you look at the depopulation in terms of the global warming movement, if we stop using hydrocarbon fuels, the modern industrial state will come to a grinding halt. And that's what the left knows. Basically become a Marxist movement. And this is the best way they can figure out to destroy capitalism and cause economic destruction, economic pain, which will kill millions of people. If you look at the pandemic in terms of a depopulation movement, I think the evidence is increasing there, and the vaccines. These lies that we've been told are becoming so egregious, the American public is catching on. And what I think is happening is, as the consequences of these policies are destruction, negative, including the war in Ukraine, which we've been lied to about again. The offensive is not working. Counteroffensive is not working. Thousands of Ukrainians are being slaughtered. Russia standing on the brink of using nuclear weapons. Ukraine is sending drones to attack Moscow, which is provocative. And I think this radical left doesn't mind a nuclear war. They're kind of setting the stage for a nuclear war and a massive economic downturn, a climate lockdown. All these things are dystopian. They're intended to be dystopian. When the American people wake up and realize that we're being led down a path of our own destruction, I think they're going to have a much harder time selling these policies. And Trump may be able, with the fact that they've indicted him again, to get the election back on the agenda. Now, there's two more climate stories I want to cover quickly. China has announced that it's just abandoning the Paris Agreement. And China's even given up the pretense that they want to follow this net zero emissions. This is an article by Diana Furchtgott-Roth. She interviewed me at the Heritage Foundation on my book on the climate change, which is the truth about energy, global warming, and climate change. She is not exactly my favorite conservative. We got into a bit of an argument when I pointed out that Mitchell's, the Senate leader, Mitch McConnell, his wife is Chinese, Elaine Chao, and her family is very wealthy in China. And their family wouldn't be around if McConnell wasn't doing what China wanted them to do. She didn't like that. But at any rate, she's right here. But China is, in fact, just saying that they have no intention of going to push for net zero. The EVs are not emission free because they need electricity to charge them. Electricity generation creates carbon dioxide emissions. And if China's just going to use coal and oil, which they are using with abandon, then what good does it do us to reduce our carbon emissions when China is going to be the most massive carbon dioxide culprit, if you want to say that? I think carbon dioxide will just have more trees. We can plant more trees and have more absorption of carbon dioxide. When the earth gets warmer, the oceans absorb less carbon dioxide. So the earth is getting warmer for natural reasons. And the medieval warming period, which I point out in the article I wrote on American Thinker, was much warmer than today. The idea that this is the hottest earth has ever been is nonsense. Greenland, if you look at Greenland, underneath the ice cap, there are trees and farms. Greenland was once warm. The earth is a changeable place, but it is not because of carbon dioxide. It's much more massive forces like the Milankovitch cycles, the way the earth goes around the sun, the water currents, cosmic rays, which affect the creation of clouds on the earth. Very complex system, and it's not linear. You can't predict it the way the left wants to predict it. But if China is just going to use, and China, Russia, the BRICS nations are all moving towards increased use of hydrocarbons because they want to keep their populations growing. We, on the other hand, as an advanced industrial state, seem to be entering onto this suicidal path. We exhale carbon dioxide. So according to this insane left, this critical theory left, which is Marxist, we are, in fact, our own seed of destruction. They call this the Anthropocene, which is an era where human beings are going to be the cause of our own extinction. And my next book on this will be The Truth About Neo-Marxism, Cultural Maoism, and Anarchy. And I think that's what we're in the era. The neo-Marxists are in charge of the government. They're in charge of the Department of Justice. They're in charge of the universities and the press. We're getting nothing but neo-Marxist propaganda and lies, and it's all designed to destroy the economy and to weaken America. We are rapidly coming into becoming a banana republic in which a seated president, Biden, upon whom there's increasing evidence of massive fraud, including Hunter, his son, selling out through one of his corporations, this Devon Archer, which has given speeches and been interviewed by Tucker Carlson, made it clear that even some of these deals the Bidens gave are stealth technology because China came in and bought a company that was important in the United States to developing stealth technologies for aircraft. These are treasonous acts. And yet the Department of Justice does nothing except to indict Biden's number one opponent for the 2024 election. Biden has no campaign. He is not running any ads. He's taking vacations. He's obviously experiencing senior dementia. And so, again, the Democrats have to have the confidence that they're going to win the election, whether they win it or not. And this is what Trump is going to lay on the table in this trial. The last story is finally Great Britain is waking up. On Great Britain now, this new prime minister, and Great Britain's gone through a great turmoil in leadership, but this Rishi Sunak has decided that he's going to go for a pragmatic energy policy, which means, again, abandoning net zero emissions. He has begun to let out more leases in the North Sea for oil and natural gas exploration. What's happening is that British voters are objecting. Costs of energy are going up dramatically in Great Britain, which also hurts business because businesses are affected by the higher energy costs. So when the election results start turning against the Labour Party in Great Britain, the Labour Party is deciding we better, for our own survival, we better abandon this net zero emissions policy and go back to hydrocarbon fuels, which work and will mean that we are not going to have the British people go bankrupt in order to stay warm in the winter. So they're saying British electricity is expensive due to an obsession with wind and solar, which remain extremely costly in spite of 20 years of heavy subsidy, now amounting to about £8 billion a year. Moreover, the invasion of Ukraine has exposed renewables as giving only pseudo-security of supply. British weather is no substitute for fuels of thermodynamic quality such as oil and gas. It rains too much in Great Britain, not enough sun, there's not enough rain. The push to ban new petrol and diesel cars is also premature, and the replacement with EVs ill thought through. I've been making that point consistently. EVs may have a limited role in the short term for some users in urban and suburban areas where you don't go very far, but they are simply neither ready nor affordable for the majority of drivers. Green home heating has become a laughingstock with the dramatic one-size-fits-all approach, mandatory heat pumps, a manifest failure, even those in the industry itself admitting that they just aren't suitable for all houses in all locations. And the UK emissions trading scheme has begun to put unbearable burdens on British business, which could cost 500% more this year to about $6 billion annually. Well, no wonder the Labour Party, if they stayed to net zero emissions, is going to get voted out of office. And it would be the same here, but it's going to come down to the election integrity in 2024 is now going to be a major topic, given that Trump's indictment puts the issue squarely on the table. Chris, any comments?
Oh, you hit it on the head there. All this ties together. Poor economic policy. The idea that the media and the current administration, the Department of Justice, is waving the January 6th shiny keys at everybody, the executive order that Trump put out, and Mike Pence, who's the X factor in all of this, because while media members and DOJ prosecutors are looking at Mike Pence as the guy who is going to put Trump away, he's the guy who knows what's going on behind closed doors, and he's the man of religious integrity. Problem is, those are the reasons that he's not going to send up the river, because he knows what happened behind closed doors. He happened to have disagreements with Trump over the years, but he doesn't seem like the guy who, just because he had disagreements with somebody, is willing to lie or stretch the truth to push Trump up the river or send him to jail. I don't think he'd want that on his conscience, and I don't know why the Department of Justice, who I believe is filled with people who would do the exact same thing that Pence wouldn't do, actually thinks Pence would do his best to push a former, I wouldn't say employer, but a former running mate, somebody who he ran with, up the river, unless Trump actually did something incredibly illegal or treasonous, which, again, would have come out already.
Well, if you'll remember, in the 2016 election, when Trump won, the lefty's lawfare group, Larry Tribe at Harvard and the whole group of them, were having this Hamilton electors, and they were saying that the states ought to, even though Trump won the state election, put in an elector slate which would vote at that time for Hillary Clinton in the Electoral College.
Yes.
Okay, now, if they could do that, why can't Trump say the election was rigged in 2020? I mean, the duplicity here, and Trump is going to lay this out. I mean, Trump went through 2 impeachment hearings when he was president. He won them both because the Democrats lie. The Russian collusion was a lie. I told the Mueller prosecutors they were wrong. Trump was not colluding with Russia. If anybody was colluding with Russia, it was Hillary Clinton. The Russia didn't steal the emails from the Democrats. And the proof of that was apparent if you'd really understood how the Democrats' computer systems worked. It was stolen from the inside and leaked to Assange. But, again, I was not involved, and I did not know Assange. Even Assange said I didn't know him. There's no link whatsoever. But this was all made up. And when I would not break to take the plea deal, very shortly after that, Mueller folded his tent because they had to have a link to Assange, and they did not. Same thing is going to happen here, but now the American people is going to get to see the massive corruption. And I think this is going to be combined with an economic downturn, which is going to be happening at the same time, when people are worried about putting food on the table to feed the family or keeping the house, which the family lives. They're not going to go to bat for transvestites teaching kindergarten children about sex education. They're not going to care about that issue. They're going to care about, why are we being lied to? Why are we in this economic difficulties? This is a contrived and intentionally caused failure, and it indicates the United States is becoming a second-rate country. If we want to descend down that path, we're going to regret it. But again, Trump is going to put the issues on the table, and I think Trump is capable of doing it, and the Democrats have served him up his opportunity. Last comments, Chris, before we... And by the way, please take a look at our sponsors. My Vital C, which people are saying, I'm looking younger, my hair has got color back in it again. My Vital C, I've been taking it for 4 years. It's really outstanding, and it works. Hair products, cream products. Swiss America, gold and silver, Walking Liberty, $50 offer on our website. Please take a look at it. Talk To Swiss America, I've been working with them for over 20 years. They're an excellent company. They would advise you how to put your IRAs and 401ks, at least some of it, into gold. Gold is going to start increasing dramatically in prices. This economic downturn intensifies. Chris, any final comments, and then we'll wrap up?
Again, what was it James Carville said back in, 1996? It's the economy, stupid. People are going to be paying attention to that. There are jokes going around on the internet about how still a large number of Americans would vote for President Trump had he been thrown in jail. Does that say more about President Trump or more about President Biden?
Well, I think if Trump has to run from jail, or this whole thing has only improved Trump's poll numbers. Every time the Democrats come after him, Trump gains support from the American people. It's a bad mistake the Democrats have made. These are vicious people. And finally, the fruits of their viciousness are going to become apparent to the American people when this economic downturn really gets going. Let's wrap it up. This is Dr. Jerome Corsi. Today is Monday. It's August 7th, 2023. In the end, God always wins. God will win here too. And in the spirit of 2 Chronicles 7:14, I'm encouraging you to join me in getting down on my knees and asking God to forgive us for letting the country get to this stage. We should have been fighting, taking God out of the schools, going back into the 1940s. We should have resisted Roe v. Wade harder. Millions of babies have been killed. These actions violate God's law. And God will heal our land once we acknowledge that our culpability in letting America get to this point. We'll be back tomorrow. We're doing podcasts every weekday. Thank you for joining us. God bless. We'll see you tomorrow.